Seraphina spent the following days swimming aimlessly through the sea, her mind full of thoughts about the man she had seen on the ship. The sound of his song still echoed in her heart, filling the empty spaces she hadn't realized were there. It was as if the music had awakened something deep within her, something that had been hidden in the shadows of her soul. Every time the waves gently rolled over her, she could hear the faintest trace of the song, like a whisper carried by the wind. It was almost as if the ocean itself had become part of the melody, blending the song of the sea with the tune of the human world. But now, it felt more like a puzzle she needed to solve. Seraphina couldn't stop thinking about the man's words, "I've been waiting for you." How could he have been waiting for her? She had never seen him before, and she was sure he had never seen her either. And yet, there was something about his voice that made her believe him. It was a feeling she couldn't explain, but it was powerful. Unable to shake the mystery, Seraphina decided she had to go back to the surface. She needed to see him again, to understand why their paths had crossed in such a strange, magical way. She couldn't wait any longer. There was something important between them, something they both needed to figure out. So, with determination in her heart, she swam toward the surface once more. The water above was calm, the moon shining brightly through the waves. As she broke through the surface and looked up, she saw the same ship in the distance. Her heart leapt with excitement. This time, she wouldn't wait. She would swim straight to the ship. As Seraphina approached, she could see the figure of the young man standing at the edge of the deck again, staring out at the horizon. His dark hair was tousled by the wind, and he was humming a melody, though it was quieter now. She couldn't hear it clearly from the water, but she knew it was the same song, the one that had haunted her for so long. When he turned around, his eyes immediately found her. She froze, suddenly nervous. The man's gaze was intense, almost as if he were searching for something. He stepped forward slowly, moving to the railing as if he knew she was there for him. "Are you real?" he asked again, his voice barely above a whisper. This time, Seraphina didn't hesitate. She nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to speak, to tell him everything she had been feeling, but no words came. The only sound was the wind and the soft lapping of the water against the ship. The song was still inside her, but the closer she got to him, the more confused she became. The man smiled softly, as if he could sense her confusion. "I knew you would come back. I don't understand it either, but I feel like I know you. Do you feel it too?" Seraphina's eyes widened. He felt it too. The connection, the pull, the way their hearts seemed to beat in the same rhythm. It was as though their souls had been waiting to find each other. "I don't know what this is," he continued, his voice thick with emotion, "but I can't let it go. This song, it's been in my head forever, and now you're here." Seraphina's heart ached with the weight of his words. She wanted to reach out to him, to explain everything, but the words were still locked inside her. Instead, she slowly swam closer to the ship, her eyes never leaving his. He extended his hand toward the water, his fingers brushing the surface as though he were hoping to touch her. "Can you come closer?" he asked. "I want to see you. Really see you." Seraphina hesitated. She had never been this close to a human before. The danger, the fear of being discovered, was always in the back of her mind. But something about this man, his kindness, his voice, His song made her feel safe. It made her feel like maybe she wasn't so different from him after all. With a deep breath, she swam up to the ship, drawing closer to the man. As she emerged from the water, she felt the cool night air on her face, the wind tussling her hair. For a moment, they just stared at each other in silence, both unsure of what to do next. Finally, the man spoke, his voice shaking. "You're beautiful," he whispered. "I've never seen anything like you." Seraphina smiled softly, though she couldn't help but feel a little shy. She had always known she was different from humans, but hearing him say it made her feel like she was something special, something worth seeing.
"I'm Seraphina," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. His eyes widened in amazement. "Seraphina, that name. It's beautiful too." "I know it's strange," she continued, her voice growing more confident. "But the song, it's always been there. And now I've found you. I don't understand it all yet, but it feels like we're meant to be connected. Like our stories have always been tied together somehow." The man's eyes softened with understanding. "I'm Caleb," he said, "and I think you're right. Our stories are connected, even if we don't know how. But I know I've been waiting for you, Seraphina. The song, it's never been just a song to me. It's been a part of my life, like it was calling me to something. I just didn't know what. Until now." Seraphina nodded, her heart full of emotions she couldn't quite explain. There was so much to discover, so much to understand. But one thing was certain: this was only the beginning. "I don't know what this means," Caleb continued, his voice filled with wonder. "But I want to know. I want to understand why this song brought us together." Seraphina looked at him, her heart full of hope. "We'll figure it out," she said softly. "Together." And so, the two of them stood in silence, the sea gently rocking the ship, as the stars twinkled above. The song of the ocean had led them to each other, and though the journey ahead was still unknown, they both knew one thing: they were no longer alone. The days that followed felt like a dream for Seraphina. Every time she rose from the water and looked up at Caleb, her heart fluttered in a way it never had before. They spent their time together on the ship, talking and sharing stories. Caleb telling her about his life above the waves, and Seraphina speaking of her underwater world, full of colors and creatures that seemed impossible to describe. The connection between them was undeniable, like two stars that had always been meant to shine beside each other. Yet, even in these peaceful moments, Seraphina felt a tug inside her, reminder that they came from two different worlds, two different lives. She was a mermaid, part of the deep ocean, while he was a human, belonging to the land. She had never truly understood how they could be so connected when they lived in separate realms. It was a puzzle she still hadn't solved. Caleb, however, didn't seem bothered by the difference. He was fascinated by everything Seraphina told him, fascinated by her presence. He would ask her questions about the sea, about its mysteries, as if trying to learn everything he could. But Seraphina could tell there was something he didn't fully understand. There were questions he was afraid to ask, questions about how their connection would survive in a world so vast and different. One evening, as the ship sailed through calm waters, Caleb turned to her, his face filled with an earnest look that made Seraphina pause. "Seraphina," he said softly, "I have to ask you something." She tilted her head, her hair floating around her like a cloud in the water. "What is it?" "Do you ever wonder what it means? This song, this connection between us. I've been thinking about it so much, and I have this feeling that there's more to it than just US meeting." He stopped for a moment, trying to find the right words. "Do you think we could ever truly be together? I mean, we're from two completely different worlds." Seraphine's heart sank at his words. It was a question she had been avoiding herself. She had always known that being with Caleb wasn't something simple or easy. The world above and the world below were so far apart. literally and metaphorically. She had been so caught up in the beauty of the connection between them that she hadn't really allowed herself to face the truth. "I don't know, Caleb," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to believe it's possible, but I don't know if it is. I'm from the ocean. You're from the land. There are things we can't change." Caleb's expression softened, and he reached out, placing his hand gently on the railing of the ship. "I don't know how this happened, Seraphina, but I do know that when I'm with you, it feels like I'm home. Like all my life, I've been waiting for you, and now I finally understand why." Seraphine's breath caught in her throat. "I feel the same way," she said quietly. "But it's not just about feelings. There are rules. The ocean has its own way, and humans have their own way. They're not meant to mix. They never have been." Caleb gazed out at the horizon, the light of the moon reflecting off the dark ocean. What if there's a way to make it work? What if this song, this pull between us, means there's something more to it? What if it's not just fate, but something that can change the world? Maybe we don't have to accept the rules as they are. Seraphina felt a flicker of hope deep inside her chest. Could it be possible? Could their connection truly be the bridge between their worlds? It was a thought she had never dared to entertain before. But now, in Caleb's presence, with his words wrapping around her like a promise, she wondered if it might be true. "I want to believe that too," she said softly, her voice filled with the longing she had been keeping hidden. "But I've never seen anything like this before. No mermaid has ever left the ocean for the land. It's forbidden. There are creatures, ancient beings in the sea, who believe that crossing the line between our worlds would cause chaos." Caleb turned back to her, his eyes filled with determination. "Then we'll find a way to change it. We don't have to live by those rules. We'll create our own path, Seraphina." Her heart swelled with emotion, but there was still doubt lingering. But how? The ocean is powerful. It controls everything beneath the waves. It's not something you can just change. Caleb smiled, as if the doubts in her voice only made him more sure of himself. "Maybe we start small. Maybe we start by finding out why the song called us to each other in the first place. Maybe we can understand what brought us together, and then maybe we'll know what to do next." Seraphina felt a surge of hope. Could they really change things? Could they figure out the song that had drawn them together? The song that had been sung through the ages, and turn it into something that could unite their worlds? "Okay," she said, her voice firm with newfound resolve. "We'll figure it out together." The next few days were spent in quiet determination. Caleb and Seraphina spoke about everything. Everything they could think of that might explain the strange pull between them. Caleb, as human as he was, spent more and more time on the ship, watching the horizon and the way the ocean shifted with every gust of wind. Seraphina spent hours underwater, trying to understand the song from her side, what it was, why it was calling to her. One night, while Seraphina swam beneath the waves, she felt something shift. The water seemed to grow colder, and a strange pressure began to build around her. She swam deeper, hoping to escape the strange sensation, but it followed her. Suddenly, the water grew darker, and the very current seemed to change its flow. Then she heard it, the song, but this time, it wasn't soft and gentle. It was urgent and demanding. A melody filled with warnings and cries for help. It was a voice, but it wasn't Caleb's. This voice was ancient, full of power, as though the very ocean itself was speaking to her. Seraphina froze, her heart pounding. "Who is this?" she whispered into the deep. The answer came in a rush of sound, distorted, as if the ocean itself were speaking through the song.
You have been called to the surface. Seraphina. the price of crossing the boundaries. More than you understand. The song was never meant to unite you with the land. The ocean will not allow it.
Seraphine's pulse quickened. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaking with fear. "Why do you warn me?"
I am the keeper of the deep. I have seen what happens when the world's collide. The balance will be broken, and everything you hold dear will be lost.
The song grew louder, its notes drowning out her thoughts, pushing her back toward the depths. Seraphina struggled to stay grounded, but the force of the song was overwhelming. "The ocean will claim you," the voice warned. "The song must end. You must return to the sea, or the destruction will begin." Seraphine's mind raced. Was this a warning from the ocean itself, or something more? She had to make a choice. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the song was only the beginning. And now she would have to face the forces that had been guarding the ocean's secrets for centuries. Seraphine's heart hammered in her chest as the voice of the keeper of the deep faded into the depths of the ocean. The words echoed in her mind, reverberating through her very soul. "The ocean will claim you. The balance will be broken. The song must end." She tried to shake the fear that had taken hold of her, but it was no use. The ocean itself had spoken, and the power in its warning felt too strong to ignore. The sea had always been a part of her, but now, the very thing she had loved all her life seemed to be turning against her. As the song faded, Seraphina swam back toward the surface, her thoughts clouded with the warning she had just received. The keeper of the deep, who was this entity that ruled the ocean in such a way? And why had it spoken to her? She broke through the water, gasping for air, her long hair floating around her like a cloud. The ship was still anchored in the distance, its lanterns glowing softly against the dark sky. She could see Caleb standing at the railing, staring out at the water, as though waiting for her. The sight of him calmed her, but the weight of the ocean's warning hung heavy in her heart. She swam toward the ship, her movements slow and deliberate, her thoughts racing. Caleb looked down at her as she approached. "Seraphina," he called out, his voice filled with concern. "Are you okay?" Seraphina stopped just beneath the ship, her hands gripping the sides of the vessel as she looked up at him. "Caleb, there's something I need to tell you. Something I don't understand." Caleb's brow furrowed with worrying. "What is it? What happened?" "The ocean. It spoke to me," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "The keeper of the deep. It warned me. It said the song wasn't meant to unite us, and that crossing the boundary between our worlds would cause everything to fall apart." Caleb's eyes widened in shock. "What do you mean? The ocean spoke to you?" Seraphina nodded, still trying to process the weight of it all. "It's as though the ocean itself is alive, guarding its boundaries. The song, the connection between us, it's not something the ocean wants. It said the balance would be broken if we kept going. Do you think that's true?" Caleb asked softly, his voice full of concern. "Do you think the ocean will really destroy everything?" Seraphina closed her eyes, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside her. I don't know. I don't know if the ocean will destroy us, but I feel its power. It's not something I can ignore. Caleb reached down to her, his hand hovering just above the water. We've come this far, Seraphina. I don't want to lose you now. Seraphina looked up at him, her heart torn. She had never felt so conflicted. The pull of the song, the pull of Caleb, was so strong, so undeniable. But the ocean, the very thing she had called home, was warning her that this path could destroy everything. I don't want to lose you either, she whispered, her voice breaking. But the ocean, it's not something I can fight. It's been here long before me, long before either of us. For a long moment, Caleb didn't say anything. He just stood there, his hand still outstretched, his eyes searching hers. The silence between them felt heavy, filled with unsaid words and unanswered questions. The stars above twinkled, their distant light offering no answers, only the vastness of the world around them. Finally, Caleb spoke, his voice quiet but resolute. We don't have to fight the ocean, Seraphina. We just need to understand it. There's got to be a way for us to be together without destroying everything. We can't just give up because of one warning. Seraphine's heart stirred at his words. She had always admired Caleb's determination, his belief that things could be changed, that love could overcome any obstacle. But even as she felt the hope in his voice, a part of her couldn't shake the fear that the ocean's warning wasn't something to take lightly. I don't know if it's that simple, she said softly. The ocean is ancient, Caleb. It has its own rules, its own way of doing things. I don't want to be the cause of its destruction. Caleb stepped closer to the railing, his hand now gently resting on it. Maybe the ocean's rules aren't set in stone. Maybe it's time for a new path. Together, we can find it. We don't have to let fear dictate what we can or can't do. Seraphina stared up at him, feeling the weight of his words sink into her. There was something in his eyes, something fierce and unwavering that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to make this work. She wasn't sure how, or if it was even possible. But she knew one thing, Caleb wasn't going to give up on her. And for the first time, Seraphina felt like she didn't want to give up either. You're right, she said quietly. We can't give up, but we need to understand what we're up against. The ocean isn't something we can just walk away from. There are forces at play here that we don't fully understand. Caleb nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. Then let's find out what they are. We can't change what we don't understand, but together, we can learn. Seraphina felt a spark of hope stir in her chest. It was dangerous, this path they were on, and she didn't know what the future held. But Caleb's belief in them, in their connection, gave her the courage to keep moving forward. Maybe they didn't have all the answers, but together, they could face whatever came next. The song, the ocean, the keeper of the deep, they were all part of something bigger. And it was up to them to uncover its secrets. Okay, Seraphina said, her voice steady. Let's figure it out, together. Caleb smiled, and Seraphine's heart swelled with the certainty that, no matter what the ocean threw at them, they would face it side by side. The next morning, as dawn broke across the horizon, Seraphina and Caleb set their course. They decided to seek out the ocean's ancient beings, the creatures that had guarded its secrets for centuries, hoping they could offer some insight into the warning Seraphina had received. The journey ahead would be treacherous, but neither of them was willing to back down now. The connection between them was too strong, the bond too real. As they sailed farther into the ocean's depths, Seraphina felt a sense of dread settle in her chest. She had never ventured this far from the safety of her home, in the kingdom of the merfolk. But now, with Caleb by her side, it felt like they were headed toward something much larger than either of them could fully comprehend. The song was still there, faint in the distance, and Seraphina felt it in the waves as they crashed against the ship. It was calling to her, louder than ever. But this time, she wasn't afraid. She was ready to face whatever lay ahead. As they sailed deeper into the ocean, the waters grew darker, and the air became thick with tension. Something was waiting for them, something that could hold the key to their future, or destroy everything they had fought for. Seraphina took a deep breath and looked out over the ocean, her heart filled with determination. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for sure. She and Caleb would face it together. The days blurred together as Seraphina and Caleb sailed deeper into the heart of the ocean. The ship creaked and groaned under the pressure of the heavy waves, but Caleb never faltered, always watching the horizon with a kind of quiet determination. Seraphina could see the same uncertainty reflected in his eyes, but there was something else there too, something she couldn't quite name. It was the kind of look that made her feel that, no matter how dangerous this journey became, they would keep moving forward. The ocean had grown darker, the light from above barely reaching the surface. It was as if the very waters were growing heavier with secrets, and with each passing hour, Seraphina felt the weight of the ancient song more and more. She couldn't understand it, not fully. The keeper of the deep's warning echoed in her mind constantly, and the thought of the balance being broken made her heart ache with fear. She didn't know what would happen if the ocean truly rejected her, but she wasn't willing to find out either. "You're quiet today," Caleb said one evening, breaking the silence that had settled over them. He stood beside her at the railing, watching the waters as the ship sliced through the waves. "What's on your mind?" Seraphina glanced over at him, her heart softening at the concern in his voice. Caleb had been by her side through everything, offering her a kind of steadiness she hadn't even known she needed. Yet even he seemed to feel the weight of the journey now. "I can feel it," she said softly, looking out into the dark sea. "The ocean. It's not the same anymore. There's something wrong. I don't know what it is, but the song is different, more urgent." Caleb's face grew serious. "You mean the warning from the keeper?" She nodded. "Yes, and I can feel it in the waves too. It's like the sea is trying to pull us somewhere, but I don't know where." They stood in silence for a long while, the sound of the waves crashing against the ship the only noise between them. For all their bravery, for all their hope, neither of them could ignore the heavy sense of foreboding that surrounded them. Then, in the distance, something caught Seraphine's eye. A faint shimmer of light far below the surface. It was like the ocean itself was glowing from within, as if there was something hidden beneath the waves, something ancient and powerful. "Do you see that?" Seraphina asked, pointing toward the shimmering light. Caleb squinted into the water. "I see it." "What is it?" Seraphine's heart raced. She had heard of such lights before, legends from the merfolk about hidden realms in the ocean where the oldest and most powerful creatures lived. But she had never imagined that they would actually find one. I think that's where we need to go," she said, her voice filled with awe and fear. "That light, it's not just a reflection. It's something deeper." Caleb's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" Seraphina nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "I have to be the song. It's calling me toward it. I feel it, and I think it's calling you too." Without another word, Caleb turned to the crew, giving orders to steer the ship toward the shimmering light. The wind picked up, and the ship moved swiftly, cutting through the water with ease. But Seraphina couldn't shake the sense of unease that clung to her. She didn't know what they were about to face, but she knew it would change everything. As they approached the glowing light, the water around them began to grow colder. The sea's currents became stronger, pushing against the ship as though trying to keep them away. But Caleb refused to turn back. They were so close now, closer than they had ever been to uncovering the ocean's secrets. Finally, the ship came to a halt, its sails fluttering in the wind as they floated above the source of the light. The sea beneath them seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. And Seraphina could hear the song again this time. It was louder, clearer, as though it were calling her name from the very depths of the ocean. "Seraphina," Caleb said, his voice low. "What happens now?" She didn't know how to answer. All she could do was look at the dark waters below, knowing that the path ahead was uncertain and fraught with danger. But there was no turning back now. Whatever lay beneath the surface had the answers they were seeking. "I have to go down," Seraphina said, her voice filled with resolve. "I have to know what it is." Caleb's face grew pale. "Are you sure? I can't go down there with you. The pressure, the depth, it's too dangerous." "I know," Seraphina said, her voice quiet but firm. "But this is something I have to do alone." She could see the reluctance in Caleb's eyes, but he didn't argue. Instead, he stepped aside, allowing Seraphina to move toward the edge of the ship. She took a deep breath and dove into the water, her body cutting through the cold depths with ease. The water enveloped her, and the glowing light grew brighter as she descended. She felt the song growing louder, filling her ears, pulling her deeper. It wasn't just the sound of music anymore, it was the ocean's voice, calling to her, urging her toward the heart of the sea. As she swam deeper and deeper, the light became blinding, and the water grew colder still. But Seraphina didn't stop. She knew she had to reach the source of the light, the heart of the ocean that had been hidden for so long. Finally, she reached the bottom, where the light shone so brightly it almost hurt her eyes. Before her stood a massive stone structure, ancient and covered in coral. It looked like a temple, a place that had been built by creatures far older than any of the merfolk or humans she had known. The walls of the temple shimmered with energy, and as Seraphina approached, the ocean's song intensified. She felt a pull toward the center of the temple, where an enormous crystal stood, glowing with an ethereal light. The crystal seemed to pulse with power, and Seraphina felt its energy coursing through her. It was the source of the song, the reason she had been called here. And as she reached out to touch the crystal, a voice strong, commanding echoed through the temple, stopping her in her tracks. "You should not have come." Seraphine's heart skipped a beat. She knew the voice. It was the same one that had spoken to her before, the keeper of the deep. "Why are you here?" The voice demanded. "Do you truly believe you can change the fate of the ocean?" "I had to know the truth," Seraphina said, her voice steady despite the overwhelming presence of the voice. "I have to understand the song. I have to know why it brought me here, why it brought me to Caleb. The song was never meant to unite you with the land. It is a force older than time, a force that keeps the balance of the ocean intact. If you persist, you will destroy everything." "I don't want to destroy anything," Seraphina replied, her heart heavy with the weight of the words. "But I don't want to live in fear anymore. I want to understand why we are connected, why we were called to each other." There was a long pause, the silence so thick it felt like the ocean itself had held its breath. Then the voice spoke again, softer this time, almost regretful. "The song is a bridge, but it is fragile. If it is broken, the consequences will be dire. The balance between the sea and the land must be preserved." Seraphine's fingers hovered over the crystal, her heart pounding with the understanding that the ocean was not just a force of nature. It was alive, and it had its own rules. But those rules had never accounted for someone like her, someone caught between two worlds. "I will not break the balance," Seraphina said, her voice firm with a newfound strength. "But I will not live in fear either. I will find a way to make it work. I'll protect both the ocean and the land." The voice seemed to consider her words, and then, finally, it spoke again. "The path you walk will not be easy, but perhaps you are the one to change it." With that, the light around Seraphina seemed to fade, and the ocean's song softened, becoming a gentle hum in the background. The crystal's glow dimmed, but the power it contained still pulsed in the air around her. She had been given a choice, a path that was hers to walk. With a final glance at the temple, Seraphina turned and swam back toward the surface, where Caleb awaited. The journey ahead was uncertain, but she was no longer afraid. Seraphina surfaced, the cold ocean water rushing around her as she broke through the surface. She gasped for air, her chest heaving from the pressure of the deep. dive, and the weight of the revelations she had just uncovered. The shimmering light from the ancient crystal still lingered in her mind, but now it was fading, like a dream slipping away upon waking. Caleb was waiting at the edge of the ship, his eyes wide with concern. His gaze never wavered from her as she swam closer, his hands gripping the railing, as if he could will her back to him with just his presence. "Seraphina," he called, his voice filled with urgency. "Are you all right?" She could hear the worrying in his tone and smiled faintly as she climbed the ship's side and pulled herself aboard. Her limbs felt weak from the depths, but the weight of the moment was heavier than the ocean itself. "I'm fine," she said, her voice softer than usual. "But I learned more than I expected. The ocean has its own laws, Caleb, its own purpose. The song we've been following, it's not just a connection. It's a warning and a promise." Caleb's brow furrowed in confusion as he helped her steady herself on the deck. "What do you mean?" Seraphina stepped back from him, her eyes distant, still processing the events that had unfolded. "The ocean. It's not just a body of water, Caleb. It's alive, ancient. I went down to the heart of the ocean, to the source of the light that led us here. The keeper of the deep spoke to me again. It said that the balance between the sea and the land must remain intact. If we break it, if we continue pushing for this connection, everything will fall apart." Caleb listened intently, his face etched with concern, but his eyes never left hers. He seemed to understand the weight of what she was saying, even if it didn't make complete sense to him. "But why? Why would the ocean reject us? You were called, Seraphina. We've both felt it. We can't just ignore this connection." Caleb's voice was firm, but the uncertainty still lingered in his eyes. Seraphina turned away slightly, looking out at the vast ocean stretching before them. She could feel its presence, immense, ancient, and full of power. There was no denying it. The ocean was alive, and it had a purpose that went beyond her, beyond anything either of them could understand. Yet still, her heart tugged toward Caleb, urging her not to give up. "I'm not rejecting our connection, Caleb. I don't want to," Seraphina said, her voice cracking slightly. "But there's a reason why the ocean has these boundaries. The keeper of the deep warned me. If we push too far, if we break the natural order, it will destroy not just us, but everything we know. The ocean is a force of nature, just like the land. Neither can exist without the other. But if one tries to take too much from the other, everything will collapse." Caleb took a deep breath and stepped closer, his hand gently brushing against hers. "So what does that mean for us? For me, for you, for everything we've felt?" Seraphina closed her eyes, fighting the emotion welling up inside her. "It means we have to choose. I don't know how. But we can't just keep pushing for something that wasn't meant to happen. We have to find a way to balance this connection without destroying either of our worlds. The ocean, it will not allow us to ignore its laws, but it also sees something in us, something different. But it's a fragile balance. One wrong move, and everything could be lost." Caleb's grip tightened around her hand. "Then we find a way to make it work. I don't care if it's fragile, or impossible, or dangerous. We've already made it this far. There's got to be a way to make this work without breaking either of our worlds." Seraphina looked into his eyes, her heart full of conflicting emotions. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to find a way to be with Caleb, to live in a world where they could both exist side by side, where the land and sea were not divided by impossible boundaries. But deep inside, she still heard the keeper's voice echoing in her mind. "You are walking a thin line. Choose wisely." "I wish it were that simple," Seraphina whispered, her voice barely audible against the crashing of the waves. "But I've seen what happens when the balance is broken. The sea will not hesitate to reclaim what it believes is its own." Caleb's eyes softened with understanding, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the situation pressed down on them both, and the silence between them grew thick with the realization that they were standing at the edge of something much bigger than either of them had anticipated. Finally, Caleb broke the silence, his voice steady but filled with determination. Then we need to find out what that balance really is. We can't let this forceless ocean tear us apart before we've even had a chance to understand it. Seraphina nodded slowly, her eyes searching the horizon. The light of the rising sun began to break through the clouds, casting a soft golden glow across the water. The ocean's deep blue seemed to shimmer with new life, and for the first time in days, Seraphina felt a small spark of hope. I'll do whatever it takes to find a way. But we'll need help, she said, her voice more confident now. We need to understand the full extent of what's at stake. We need to learn from those who know the ocean's deepest secrets. Caleb nodded, his hand gently squeezing hers. We'll find those who can help us. We won't stop until we've figured this out.